Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 292, Sterling versus O'Malley. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm doing wicked good.
Oh,
I'm in New England. The fights are in Boston and Beantown. I'm wicked excited. I got my Red Sox hat on. I got the GOAT jersey. I'm not talking about Bo Nickal. I'm talking about Tom Brady. I'll pop open. If I get it open, I'll pop open a where am I at? A nice
right
Sam
there.
Adams for you.
Oh, outstanding. Yeah, for those of you who are enjoying this on an audio-only podcast format, you are missing quite the show here, as Keith looks like some dude from Barstool Sports. Yes, obviously.
How you doing, man?
I am doing great. I'm not doing as well as you because the UFC isn't touching down in Texas this weekend, but
Hold on. Did you say Texas?
I said the magic word, and now we got. Oh, that was quite the sight right there. Obviously, this is the UFC with one of their, at least on paper, originally bigger deal pay-per-view events of the year in the TD Garden in Boston. It still has two title fights at the top, featuring one champ who, fair or not, still has a lot to prove. One who is building on her case as one of the most dominant women ever to lace them up. But the rest of this down the card, this card's got taken quite a few body blows. We've lost a couple of matchups. Some room had to be made on the card for this to be the de facto finale of the season 31 of The Ultimate Fighter. There is a lightweight final taking place on this card. There's a bantamweight final probably taking place, and we don't even know who all's in it, at least officially, because there's still one episode to go. So that's kind of weird. I mean, give me your general temperature on this card. All we have are 10 fights to talk about, though we probably should have 11 by the time it rolls around. How you feeling about this one for $80?
Yeah, so people who are listening to this show, probably Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they'll know the fight, who Brackettone is fighting. We don't know. Even if we could find out, we're not gonna Josh Gross ourselves. And
or Ariel Helwani ourselves, or anyone else who's drawn the wrath.
Yeah, but so this is actually going up a day late again. I want to apologize once again. It wasn't Ben, it was me. From now into probably Labor Day, my life is super crazy. So hopefully I'll get back on the same schedule. So I apologize once again to those who like to listen to or watch this show on the Monday morning. That's on me again. So thanks for being patient. As far as the card, it took some heavy blows. I mean, you go down losing Rob Font versus Song Yadong, two ranked bantamweights. That fight being completely scrapped hurts. Mario Batista versus Cody Sandhagen being scrapped. Even if Batista gets an opponent, most likely they want to get someone, at least the name value of Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah.
Will they get someone as good as him at this point? Maybe, but even like some of the replacements, getting Neil Magny instead of Jeff Neal, probably about the equal test in different ways for Ian Garry, but not as exciting as a violent guy like Jeff Neal. And then the last one, losing, former two-weight champion Henry Cejudo, replacement with Pedro, was a good replacement, but still, Cejudo, the bigger personality, the more accomplishments. So none of the changes was an improvement. And then you get the Ultimate Fighter season stuff thrown on there for, I don't know, maybe I don't know if Connor's going to be in attendance and they're hoping for that, being that he loves Boston and everything. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. You make a good point about some of the fights that we've lost here. Marlon Vera versus Henry Cejudo. Obviously, I mean, it was a cool sounding bout to start with, but
sure.
The UFC was probably banking on some potential for chaos there because you could totally see if he won, especially Cejudo making some noise at whoever won the bantamweight title fight at the end of the night, whether it was Sterling, who just beat him by split decision in their last fight, or O'Malley, and the UFC would have been drooling over an O'Malley Cejudo title fight just for the talk that would have led up to it. So that's a blow on a competitive, I think, as well as promotional level. But hey, we're stuck with the card we have, and we're definitely going to dig into all 10 of these fights one by one. But just some general thoughts on the bantamweight final, whether it ends up being Katona versus Gibson or Katona versus Rico Disciulo. I mean, Brad Katona, I think, is a better fighter than the end of his UFC run made him look. And the fact that he rattled off 4 straight wins in Brave CF afterwards certainly would seem to bolster that. But the other semifinal, we're talking about 2 guys in Gibson and Disciulo. Disciulo's 36 already and has never really plied his trade in a high-level promotion. Gibson is going to be 36 in a couple weeks, and he exited the UFC on a 1-3 run that I think did reflect about how good a fighter he is. So, I mean, whoever wins that, I expect Katona is going to be a big favorite against him. But, I mean, even if Katona dusts whoever it is, it's hard for me to think of him as more than a good story. It just takes so much to make a splash at 135.
Yeah, you're forgetting something though. Disciulo's from Southie, you know. He's from the Boston. I don't know if he's really from Southie. I don't know. You know, it would be better for the UFC if he is the one who wins and he's, you know, in his hometown making his debut. You know, gets that fight a little bit more exciting for the crowd. One thing I did want to mention, you talked about Henry Cejudo if he won, and you know the back issues with Sterling, and they had a great fight, and then obviously with O'Malley, and they've kind of squared up. Don't forget there's some history between Marlon Vera and O'Malley too. If that fight was the surface too, so this, you know,
absolutely.
Like, so, yeah, that was a big hurt. Overall, the card, the main event's interesting. You know, whether I know there's a lot of people that are strong on one side or the other, but it's still some big, big personality. O'Malley, kind of a disrespected champion for years, who's really been doubted his whole career and continues to find victories, whether it's controversial, whether it's close, whatever, but still keeps winning and chugging along. And so the main event to me carries some weight. I give this card like a C+.
I'd say I might even just give it a straight C as it is right now. I mean, it's not just that I'm not interested. I actively don't want to see Chris Weidman back from like 2.5 years away on a pay-per-view main card. You know, just that's about it. There's a couple of interesting prospects on the undercard. Both Silvas, Natalia and Karine Silva, are really interesting. Andre Petroski, I mean, I wasn't that high on him, but as long as he keeps proving me wrong, I'm going to keep tuning in. But yeah, I mean, again, this card is what it is. Like it's not outlandishly bad enough to just shit all over. It's not great enough to get all up its arms about. So yeah, it sounds like a C or a C+ to me. You ready to dig into these prelims?
Yeah, let's do it.
At least as the card is set up as of the beginning of fight week, the first fight on the prelims is a flyweight matchup between Maryna Moroz and Karine Silva. Moroz, the 31-year-old Ukrainian, is 11-4 overall. She is 7-4 in the UFC. She's coming in off of a loss. She last fought back in November at UFC Fight Night Zechekwu versus Kudalaba, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Jennifer Maia. Prior to that, she had been on a 3-fight win streak that had propelled her into the outer edges of the rankings. So she'll be looking to reclaim some momentum at the expense of Silva, who has all the momentum you could possibly want. 29-year-old Brazilian is 16-4 overall. She is 2-0 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. She is 2-0 in the UFC with 2 first-round submissions of Poliana Botelho and Caitlin Souza. The more recent of those, the Souza fight, was at UFC on ESPN, Cara France versus Albazi back in June. So she'll be looking to make it 3 in a row. Odds here do slightly favor Silva. She's minus 165 or so. Moroz plus 140. The interesting thing about this one, Keith, is of course that both these women have fought already. This is a rematch of their clash about 8 years ago, which is saying something considering they're only 29 and 32 respectively. It was very early in both of their careers, but they fought back in 2014, I believe it was, and Moroz armbarred Silva pretty easily. Obviously, any rematch of two fighters that's 8 years ago is going to be of limited value in predicting how a fight between them looks today. I mean, think of when people like Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman rematched, or Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori, and like you had to be very cautious in drawing too many conclusions from the first time they fought. Here, I think it's even more so, but I understand why Silva is a favorite here, even though Moroz handled her the first time out, because Moroz to me seems just like a refined and more physically mature version of that fighter, whereas Silva seems substantially better. Silva, even now, and it feels strange to say considering that she actually has more career fights than Moroz, but Silva still has a little bit of a green prospect feel to me, whereas Moroz has felt kind of like a finished product even since she debuted in the UFC by armbarring Joanne Wood. But especially at the time they first fought, and that first fight between them it's available on YouTube. Silva felt super, super raw. I can't remember how many fights she had at that time, but she seemed like a scrappy athlete still learning to fight. The things that Moroz is good at, she's been good at all along, and the things that have hampered her, I'm not sure that they're really fixable. Like, she's not a great athlete. Like, she's long-limbed, strong, like powerfully built, either for strawweight or flyweight. But yeah, like not terribly fast. I think she's a little defensively porous on the feet. She's a very good submission artist who's a bit of an armbar specialist. And that was plenty to take care of Karine Silva in 2014. But here, I think for Moroz to win, Silva would have to make a mistake. And that's possible, but it's not what I'm leaning towards. In the intervening time, Silva has become a really, really dangerous fighter on the ground herself, as evidenced by her 3 straight submission wins between the Contender Series and her first 2 UFC fights. I see this as being the kind of fight where Moroz doesn't really have a safe place to be. On the feet, I think Silva is probably going to tag her up. I think she has better one-shot power. I think she actually might throw a better diversity of strikes. And if it goes to the ground, I don't think she's just going to blunder into an armbar or get an armbar set up on her by Moroz. I think Silva will be the more active one. I think she could sweep Moroz or threaten submissions from the bottom. I think if she ends up on top, I think she'll be able to steer clear of Moroz's offense and probably just beat her up from top position, maybe work for a submission later. But I do think this rematch very much favors Silva. I think she's going to be able to highlight the improvements in her game in the past 8 years. Give me Silva here. I'm going to say she gets a second round submission, but a second round stoppage by ground and pound, would be effectively the same thing. I think it's going to be one of those things where she just has Moroz in a bad situation on the ground and Moroz has to choose her own poison.
Yeah, this is I totally agree with what you said about the first match. Like, don't even bother watching it. It's completely irrelevant. Moroz, I agree. She's definitely like a veteran of these two, even though Silva has more fights. Just the feel, Moroz has been in the UFC for a long time. She's a kickboxer with some pretty good high output, works behind a jab. I like that she targets the body, but I've said this before, she lacks power, and that's because she throws a lot of arm punches. She has a lot of defensive flow. She backs straight up on the center line. She lacks head movement. I do like her calf kicks, and she's actually one of the few fighters that checks leg kicks, which is surprising in general, being that, she's considered a kind of a fighter with a lot of defensive flows, as you said. So, in the boxing realm, so that's pretty impressive. She has a good chin. She's been in some firefights. I go back to like the Mario Bueno Silva. That's a fight that obviously aged well, and she ate some big shots from her and didn't crumble, though she was hurt to the body by Silva. She can battle in the clinch a little bit. I agree with you. I think she's a better wrestler than she gets credit for. I think that's the best part of her game. She's one of the ones she can shoot for takedown. She'll just catch a kick and get it there. Pretty solid takedown defense. Good on top. So landed some good ground and pound against Bueno Silva, and good cardio. Now, Karine Silva, she's a boxer with pretty fast hands. Throws straight shots down the pipe. Attacks with combinations. Throws a lot of kicks. I like her teep kick. I think she's got a very good high kick. I put her as a decent wrestler. She chains takedowns together pretty well. I like her body lock takedowns. Has a slick ground game overall. Quick back take. She has 8 submission wins. She can kind of get subs off her back. Go back to like the Contender Series fight. She almost got a go-go plata in that fight. But one concern I do have in this fight is she plays BJ a little bit too much. So if she's on bottom, that could be the avenue of victory for Moroz to kind of just win a wrestling match. I think I'm a little higher on both these fighters than you. Like I'd say I'm low-key like both of them. Not contenders or anything like that, especially talking about Moroz, not in that sense. But I think she might be slightly better than we think when we think about people in the division. I think it's pretty even on defeat, but ironically that Moroz won on the ground last time, and I think I'm leaning Silva on the ground now. So I think she can get some back takes. I think her wrestling might be a little bit better than Moroz. I think Moroz won't get subbed, but she'll lose a majority of the grappling. Give me Silva by decision.
Next up on the UFC 292 prelims is another women's flyweight matchup. This time, Andrea Lee facing Natalia Silva. Lee, the 34-year-old Louisiana native, is 13-7 overall. She is 5-5 since joining the UFC out of promotions such as LFA and Invicta. She's on a 2-fight losing streak right now. She's dropped back-to-back decisions to Viviane Araujo and Macy Barber. Prior to that, she had back-to-back stoppage wins over Antonina Shevchenko and Cynthia Calvillo. So she'll be looking to get back on track here against Silva. 26-year-old Brazilian is 15-5-1 overall. She is 3-0 in the UFC since joining out of Jungle Fight. She last fought back in May, punching out Victoria Leonardo in the first round. So she'll be looking to make it 4 in a row here, establish herself as a rising contender in this division, and she is one of the biggest favorites on the card to get it done. Silva is out there around minus 360, Lee plus 260 on the comeback. Keith, I know that Natalia Silva keeps on winning, but I don't know that I'm learning much about her because opposite of how it usually goes in most promotions, she's fighting lower level competition every time out. She's gone from Jasmine Jasdavicius to Teresa Bleda to Victoria Leonardo. Like it's
Bleda and Leonardo might not be down in competition, but definitely from Jasdavicius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, I mean, Lee, if nothing else, is very she's very well established in the division. This is her 11th fight at flyweight. She's fought just about everybody that you can, short of, making it into the title picture. Who gets it done here and how? I mean, the lines seem to imply that bettors are buying in big on Silva as a future contender, or they've really given up on Lee. How do you see this one?
Yeah. Lee this is a step in competition, so I'm surprised that the line is that big. Hold on a second. I mean, we're talking about Andrea Lee. I got to at least give her the respect she deserves. Hold on. All right.
And that's very appropriate since she wears a cowboy hat pretty frequently.
Yeah. God, this thing is terrible. So Andrea Lee, she's a distance striker with a pretty good volume. She throws a lot of straight punches down the pipe. She wants to keep her distance in the strike realm as she hates being pressured. I mean, go back to the Macy Barber fight. She really hated the pressure of Macy Barber. Her jab was on point against Cynthia Calvillo. We can say that about a lot of fighters, though, against Cynthia Calvillo. She's never been much of a power puncher, but in fairness, she did drop Viviane Araujo, who's a pretty good fighter herself in their fight. She has a good kicking game, nice teep kicks, solid body kicks. It's funny because you categorize Andrea Lee as a striker. That's what they'll call her, kickboxer, and I think she might be better like wrestler. She's an underrated wrestler. She's gotten takedown 7 out of her 10 UFC fights. She's pretty good at winning scrambles. Though in her fairness, she's a good offensive wrestler. She really needs to improve her own takedown defense. She's actually been taken down in 9 out of her 10 UFC fights. So and she needs to improve her top control when she's on top. She can wrestle, but she's not like much of a submission threat or really a threat in general. She's more like a round winner on top. And then if she's taken down, she really struggles to get back to her feet. Now, that's it for her. Got to remind everyone that we're still in Beantown. Natalia Silva, she's a really good prospect. She's a good athlete, good footwork. She can fight out of both stances, good volume. She's pretty technical for a striker. She sets up her shots well with feints, fast hands, accurate. I really like her check left hook. I like that she follows up with big combinations. She'll entertain the crowd with like some spinning attacks, which I'm not crazy about, but she's coming into her power. I mean, we saw that in her fight against Victoria Leonardo, win by knockout. I like her kicking game, fast kicks, beautiful high kick. She can throw the high kick from both stances. She needs to fix some of her defensive holes to be elite. One, she keeps her chin too high in the air, is the biggest concern. Solid wrestler. Usually, try to catch a kick to get it there. Though I do like when she closes distance, she can hit some upper body takedowns, good throws. She shows some really good takedown defense against Jasmine Jasovicius, which is really turned into a very solid win. She hit her with a wizard kick. If taken down, like Teresa Bleda was able to get her down, which is surprising. She swept her. Good ground and pound on top. She really has a good submission game, and she showed that she can go hard for 15 minutes. This is a huge step up in competition for Silva. She's a crafty veteran. I just think Silva's a better athlete. She's faster. I say she passes the test. I say she wins everywhere. Lee is tough, so I don't think she'll finish her, but give me Silva by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you on basically every point here. Lee she was always going to have tough sledding at the UFC level because despite how she looks, and I mean, she looks like she should be an elite athlete. Like, she really isn't. Like, she's not that fast. She is very strong, and she's, got like good size, good build for the division, but she's not blindingly fast. And I think that hampers her striking a little bit. You mentioned her kicking game is, the best part of her striking. Defensively, she's always been hittable on the feet, and it's really just kind of her toughness that's led her to have how's the best way to put this? Like, if not for her being pretty damn tough and having good recoverability, she'd probably have multiple like knockout losses in the UFC right now, because just about everybody's been able to hit her when they want to. And offensively, you kind of said it. Like, she's a surprisingly good offensive wrestler. She's got a good kicking game and a pretty busy striking game in general. This is low on power, which means she's kind of doomed to try to win decisions. And that puts her in a situation where she has to be perfect or near perfect or not make any big mistakes against women who are more offensively dynamic than her. And, that's just always going to be a tough look. I think it's going to cost her against Natalia Silva. Silva's faster, hits harder. While both of them have their weaknesses and liabilities on the ground, I think if this fight goes to the ground, it's probably going to be on Silva's terms. And I think Silva's going to be able to hurt her on the ground too. Lee's best chances of victory here are either if just there's something about her kicking game that kind of freezes Silva, and we get this weirdly trigger shy, like low volume outfight on the feet, which would, I mean, that'd be a drag to watch, but that would be a way that Lee could win 2 rounds out of 3. Or if we find out suddenly that Silva doesn't have much of a gas tank and Lee's able to take over late. But yeah, neither of those things is the main chance, which is why I think Silva's such a big favorite here. I agree with you that a stoppage by Silva, especially an emphatic stoppage like she's had in her last couple fights, I don't think that's super likely. That would certainly be very impressive if she can pull it off. But Lee is a different kind of tough than the women Silva's been fighting recently. So give me Silva like you said, to win all 3 rounds here pretty decisively. In her fight with Jasudavicius, like one kind of detail that kind of slides by is that she hurt Jasudavicius pretty badly in like the last 20 or 30 seconds of each of those 3 rounds, where like, if she had managed to do that earlier in the round, she might have gotten a stoppage. I could see that happening here, where like Lee is saved by the bell in at least 1 round. We head now to the middleweight division for a matchup between Andrea Petroski and Gerald Meerschaert. Petroski, the 32-year-old Pennsylvania native, is 9-1 overall. He is 4-0 since joining the UFC out of the 29th season of The Ultimate Fighter. 4 straight wins since just about exactly 2 years ago. He fought most recently at UFC 281 last November, where he took a pretty one-sided unanimous decision over Wellington Turman. So he's going to look to make it 5 in a row, probably enter the rankings at 185 pounds if he can manage to do so. And standing in his way will be Meerschaert. 35-year-old Wisconsinite is 35-16 overall. He is 10-8 in the UFC. He is coming in off of a loss. He fought at UFC 287 back in April, where he got plunked in the first round by Joseph Pfeiffer. Prior to that, he had a win over Bruno Silva last August. So Meerschaert looking to get back on track. Petroski looking to keep the momentum going. Petroski is decidedly the favorite of the two. He is minus 260, Meerschaert plus 210. Well, Keith, Andrea Petroski is a powerfully built, relatively green fighter with a wrestling background, who he certainly scans as a standout athlete who's kind of learning on the job. Normally, I would say that's like Gerald Meerschaert eats that 3 meals a day, but he's not favored to get it done here. Is that an indication that Meerschaert's fallen off, that Petroski's the real deal, or do you disagree with the line?
Give me the line again.
Petroski minus 260, Meerschaert plus 210.
Yeah, I think it should be slightly closer, maybe like negative 210 for Petroski. Like I'm not surprised he's the favorite. I mean, he's jacked up dude who's on a nice winning streak, and Meerschaert's always going to be overlooked. I mean, he's been overlooked really his whole career. He's one of our guys. We've always liked him.
Yeah,
but
I mean, he falls in the Paul Craig type, mold very much. Yeah,
absolutely. He isn't a great athlete. And he doesn't measure well. Like this was the NFL Combine. Petroski is your first round. Mel Kiper's talking about him. Can't miss. Middle linebacker. Brian Urlacher type guy, and like Petroski.
Meerschaert like a punter.
That's what I was gonna say. Meerschaert's a punter, or he's the guy who holds the wire for the head coach. Like whatever the hell that guy. Like how do you get that job? They just. Like, the guy, like, as soon as the game ends, the head coach takes the headset off and just hands it to some guy.
Yeah.
Like, what else does that guy do other than just walk around ready to get the headset?
But you know what? That guy probably makes more than, like, half the UFC champs.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So, Meerschaert, he's, the equipment manager, not a great athlete, but he makes up for it with experience and craftiness. He's a southpaw with high volume. He's a builder. He gets stronger each fight. Not the best striker. I mean, his hand speed isn't good. Does have good kicks though. I like his kicks to the body. Not a strong offensive wrestler, but can do enough to create a scramble, get his hips moving, and get the fight to the ground. Weak defensive wrestler, and he makes that even easier. We talked about this a million times with him. He'll jump guillotine. Now he'll hit it, but. Sometimes he'll find himself on the bottom. Crafty submission threat. He can get subs off his back, but he has struggled to get off the bottom. He's taken a large amount of damage over the years. I mean, we talked about him being 35, but he's an old 35. The bottom could drop out at any time. And I wonder after his last fight if we're starting to see that when he got smoked by Joe Pfeiffer. Petroski, southpaw, who is, I think you described him as a wrestler, and obviously green wrestler, and obviously that fits, but he's becoming more of a complete fighter. He likes to fight at both stances. His striking, his boxing is tight, close, has some power. I mean, we already talked about the guy like being a ripped up dude. he needs to clean up his defense a little bit. He lacks head movement. Go back to like the Bryan battle, the Zhang Hugh, they both landed on him more than they should. Like I definitely think he'd do much better now. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, he might have improved his striking. He's still a very like wrestle heavy guy. He's an explode through your hips kind of guy, blast double. If not, he's grabbing a single and he's running the pipe. He's good at driving through the hips, and he's relentless to get the takedown too. Now he does a lot of these big moves, so that's a little concerning to me because it kind of zaps his energy. But if he's on top, he's strong on top. He likes to look to advanced position, loves head attacks, head and arm choke, kind of like that wrestling special. He caught Nick Maximoff, who's known for his grappling himself, with an anaconda choke. Now, he is a wrestler, so he's not comfortable off his back. I go back again a while ago, and I probably need to take this out of my notes, but he gave up his back against Bryan Battle on Tough a couple years ago. And his sole loss was a submission loss. I'm worried about Meerschaert. That has me leaning Petroski. I have a gut feeling that Petroski might even show us more skills with his hands, but Meerschaert's inability to stop takedowns just keeps me going back to the obvious thing. It's just, he's gonna be on bottom against a stud wrestler like Petroski. Petroski's gonna have to avoid, subs while he's on top, submissions from Meerschaert from the bottom, and definitely he's gonna have to pace himself, conserve his energy. Definitely does not want to get tired and have Meerschaert coming on late in the fight. I think he does, though. I see Petroski wins. Meerschaert's so tough, so I think Meerschaert might make it to the distance, but give me Petroski by unanimous decision.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of what you are here. And I kind of mentioned, I think, during the intro that I've been underestimating Petroski, and, he just keeps winning, and I'm having to come around on him slowly. I think it probably all goes back to his one pro loss, which was it was right before he was on Tough, and he got knocked out by Aaron Jeffrey in what I'm pretty sure was an LFA title fight. It was at least the honor of that one.
I think I said he was submitted in his loss. I meant on the Ultimate Fighter show. Sorry.
Yeah, he was submitted by battle in that semifinal. I figured that's what you meant as well. But against Jeffrey, he won the first round, and he won it just like you would have expected him to at that phase of his career. Like, he wrestled him big. You mentioned like big moves. He power wrestled Jeffrey, but got stuck on the feet for just a second too long in that second round, and Jeffrey just showed himself to be a better striker. Just caught Petroski, hurt him bad, and finished the thing. And so all through his run on Tough and at least his first few fights in the UFC, I've thought of him as a wrestler who's still learning to fight. But you're right in that he's showing development from fight to fight, which is good for a relatively late starter. We are talking about a 32-year-old guy who's only in his 10th pro fight right now. And for a guy who's built like he is and likes to wrestle, it's encouraging that he's been to the third round in 3 of his 4 UFC fights. And he's won all of those fights, and he's not appeared to be especially flagging. So we know that he can at least fight 3 rounds in a fight where he is controlling the action. Like, we know that much, which, if that holds true, that closes off one of Meerschaert's major avenues to victory. You alluded to the fact that Meerschaert's game plan, all along, has usually required him to take some punishment and outlast his opponent until they either get tired or make a mistake. Certainly Petroski could make a mistake, but waiting for him to get tired might not be, it might not be a valid route to victory. Like you, I'm concerned for Meerschaert. There's a difference between turning 35 when you're a fighter who's gotten by on being elusive and never getting solidly hit, versus being like Meerschaert. And most of my wins involve me getting dinged up pretty bad in the first round, which is, that's been Meerschaert not just in his, 18 or 19 fights in the UFC. He's got over 50 career fights, and that was the case even on the regional level. Like, that's always been Meerschaert. He was the worst athlete when he was fighting in, ROC or CFFC or whatever. Like,
dude lost Jay Ellis.
Oh, he's 1-1 against Jay Ellis. We need the trilogy fight.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, just I always bring that out as my example to people that no, Jay Ellis is trying to win. He's just not, he's not Shannon Rich. He's not just like rolling over and tapping for the paycheck. Like Jay Ellis wants to win. He's just not good at it. But yeah, here, if Meerschaert can survive the initial onslaught by Petroski, I think the fight still favors Petroski because I don't think he's going to get tired. He's shown himself pretty capable of taking care of himself on the ground. I'm with you in that it's time maybe to at least put an asterisk by the notes about him losing to Battle on Tough. Because one, Battle has turned out to be a pretty crafty and slick guy. And two, Petroski just doesn't seem to be the same fighter as that 2 years later. But Meerschaert could always be put away in the first round by a guy who was fast enough, got on him fast enough, and hit hard enough. Just Ian Heinisch, Pfeiffer, obviously. I think Petroski might be able to do that. My best case scenario here is that Meerschaert manages to hold on for a decision loss, where maybe he has Petroski in some trouble late, and we learn some things about Petroski, but I'm not sure it gets there, man. I think this is the fight maybe where we realize that the miles are starting to tell on Gerald Meerschaert. Give me Petroski by first round TKO here. I think he's going to catch Meerschaert with something, and we're going to realize that legendary recoverability, that legendary chin is starting to go. So yeah, Petroski by first round TKO in a moment that'll be sad for those of us who have been fans of Gerald the punter Meerschaert for years now. Next up on the UFC 292 undercard is the lightweight final of season 31 of The Ultimate Fighter, featuring a couple of former roster talents trying to make their way back into the UFC. It is Austin Hubbard and Kurt Holobaugh. Hubbard, the 31-year-old Colorado native, is 15-6 overall. He went 3-4 during his first run in the UFC, which ended almost exactly 2 years ago with loss to Vince Pichel. He basically just alternated losses and wins for 7 fights before getting released. He won 2 fights in various regional promotions in between, including a unanimous decision win over everybody's favorite banger, Julian Lane, and got an invitation to appear on The Ultimate Fighter, where he won his way to the final with a split decision win over Roosevelt Roberts. He will try to get that second contract against Holobaugh. 36-year-old Louisiana native is 19-7 with 1 no contest. He is 0-4 in the UFC across 2 separate stints with the promotion. I mean, Kurt Holobaugh is old enough and old school enough that he originally joined the UFC out of the Strikeforce acquisition in like 2013. He fought once in the UFC, lost to Steve Seiler, got cut, went and fought a bunch of different places, including a lot of fights in Titan FC. He got called back to the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series. The very first episode, in fact, taking out Southern New England's own Matt Bassett. That first round knockout was overturned when Holobaugh tested positive for a banned IV, but he got to keep the contract nonetheless. It didn't help much as the UFC maybe punished him for the infraction by making him fight Hani Barcelos, Shane Burgos, and Thiago Moises in a row. He went 0-3 across those 3 fights, got cut, went and fought in a couple of regional promotions, but he had not fought since like May of 2021 when he got the call from The Ultimate Fighter. But against all odds, he made it through and actually saved his most impressive performance for his semifinal as he blasted Jason Knight to earn his way into this final. So it all gets settled on Saturday. Hubbard is a moderate favorite. He's minus 170, Holobaugh plus 145. Keith, I mean, I talk to you basically at least once a week, usually twice a week, every week. I know that you haven't really been following The Ultimate Fighter very closely as far as watching every episode as it comes out. Neither have I, but I definitely revisited the fights over this weekend to get ready for this. Did you learn anything from watching the fights on Tough that made you feel differently about this fight?
No, because if I would have watched like low level fighters that got washed out of the UFC, I would just put on like bare knuckle boxing. You know?
Ironically, Jason Knight could have been here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I watched a couple of the episodes. I think I was trying to follow the season. I watched the first 4 episodes, and then like one day I got missed it, and then it was like one of those on my to-do list, and then never got to it. Then all of a sudden it was like 2 episodes on my to-do list. Then it was 3 episodes, and then I just gave up. I mean, what are the signs that the UFC need to realize that just Ultimate Fighter's show's dead now? I mean, when you put the biggest star in the history of the sport on, the ratings are low. The finale is on the prelims, you know. I mean, I know with the Garbrandt fight getting canceled, maybe one fight gets to the big, who knows? But still, like, you get my point.
Yeah.
Like, just too much of a good thing is a waste, and it's been too much for about 15 years now. As far as this fight, I mean, Kurt Holobaugh is 36 years old. Like, I hate that. That said, he looked kind of good on the show. I mean, obviously he's in the finals, so his fight with Jason Knight was much different than Austin Hubbard's fight against Roosevelt Roberts. I mean, you couldn't ask for polar opposites. As Holobaugh Knight was a fantastic brawl, and Hubbard and Roberts was a terrible fight. Holobaugh, he's a pocket boxer who's pretty aggressive, throws combinations, nice 1-2 down the pipe, nice pop at his strikes. He works the body well. Defensively, he pillars, which I hate. He rolls with punches a little bit, which is better than pillaring, but he also keeps his chin high in there, which I don't like. He's willing to eat a shot to land some of his own. He was doing that against Jason Knight, and getting the better exchanges. I like his plum clinch. He can get in there. He's not much of an offense wrestler. He'll try to get the fight to the ground, but he has a submission threat. He's got 9 subs on his record, and he's got, just at the age where you think you'd see big decline at 36, he shows that he can still go pretty hard. Hubbard, he's a minus athlete. He never looks comfortable to me out there, but he's fairly well-rounded. I mean, he doesn't have major holes. He's big for the weight class. He's a little stiff. He tends to avoid strikes by backing up. His hands are slow, but to his credit, they're short, tight shots. So there's no loading up, which gives him some pop. Like he hurts guys and buckles guys with shots that they don't look like huge shots. Like if the guy didn't buckle, you wouldn't go, whoa, ooh, But that's because he just keeps everything tight and short. So I'd say he has a little bit of pop. His chin is a little high for my liking. I like his kicks down the middle. Going back to like the Marco Madsen fight when he was in the UFC, I like to step in knees in that one. He has some solid low kicks. He is heavy on his front foot, and which makes him open to leg kicks. Aaron McKenzie, who he beat in the opening round, had some success against him by kicking out his legs on the show. He's an underrated wrestler. I mean, he out-wrestled Kyle Prepolia in the UFC. He out-wrestled Aaron McKenzie, who was supposed to be the grappler of the two. Good get-up game. I mean, go back to like the Mark Madsen, who obviously is a decorated wrestler, struggled to get him down and keep him down. And he showed some pretty good ground and pounding against Aaron McKenzie and tough. Despite not getting super excited about, these guys coming back to the UFC or anything like that, I'd say, I mean, you said the odds were, what was it? Hubbard was slightly a favorite.
Yeah, Hubbard's minus 170 or so on most of your books.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought it was
45.
Oh, I thought it'd be even closer than that. That's what I was gonna say. I thought I'd say it's a pretty even fight. I think it's gonna be a slugfest because, Hubbard's not gonna have the slow output fight like technical sparring match like he did against Roosevelt Roberts. Holobaugh, if he fights against Jason Knight, he's gonna turn this into a slugfest. He's gonna let his hands go. So I think we're gonna have some good exchanges with two guys with deceivingly good punching power. I'm gonna go the opposite of the betting lines. I'm gonna go the upset. I'm gonna say that Kurt Holobaugh finally gets his first UFC win. I like the combos I saw in his last fight. I say we have a back and forth fight, and I say Holobaugh wins by split decision.
I like that pick. The reason I kind of asked you off the top, if you saw anything on Tough that made you feel differently about this fight, is because I did. And it really was just their respective semifinals where Hubbard got kind of taken to the limit in a lousy fight by Roosevelt Roberts, and Holobaugh won exactly the kind of fight that I figured he would lose against Knight. Like I figured that fight was going to be stylistic trouble for Holobaugh because Knight super underratedly tricky on the ground if it goes there, and on the feet, maybe not quite as composed as Holobaugh, but good power, and obviously a guy that did make quite a bit of noise in bare knuckle boxing during his hiatus from the sport. I'm leaning Holobaugh as well here. I don't know how much of a lease on life this is going to buy him in the UFC. Again, we're talking about a 36-year-old guy that used to fight at 145. Now probably will fight at 155. But Holobaugh may be the ultimate example of a guy who's better than his UFC record, and better than his record in general makes him look. Like, he still doesn't really have any terrible losses. He on the regionals, he's lost to people like Andre Harrison, who was started his career 18-0. His first run in the UFC, he fought Steve Seiler, who that was when Seiler was in the middle of that 13 fight win streak that that made him like
Thomas Brown and stuff.
Yeah. And then again, just that second UFC run after the win over Bissett got overturned. Honey Barcelos in 2018, Shane Burgos, Thiago Moises. That's rough sledding. Holobaugh still seems to be a good fighter that just hasn't quite gotten the right opponent in the octagon yet. Maybe Hubbard will be that opponent. Give me Holobaugh to win a really fun slugfest here that takes place primarily on the feet, but if it goes to the ground, we'll have some fun exchanges there. He finally gets his hand raised. Well, he's had his hand raised in the octagon before, but it got overturned. He gets his first real win in the UFC, and maybe these guys each pocket an extra $50K on top of it, because I think this one should be a real barn burner.
Yeah, but that fight against Bissett that got overturned, that was a contender series. So, I guess it was technically in the octagon.
It is an octagon, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I will say to add, and I know we're going to move on, spend too much time on this fight anyways. Tough is weird because I try, and I can get sucked into this, try to remember that, that's not the best example of the guy's skills, because everything's so different. One, they don't have their coaches. Two, they have such a quick turnaround. Yeah. You're living with your opponent. It's just a really weird dynamic. That's why a lot of times the guy who wins is not the best guy out of the season. A lot of times. I mean, you know better than I do because you write those articles, so you know better than that. Yeah. Yeah,
that's a very fair point. I mean, and I want to say these guys were actually teammates and had to split up ahead of their final. Yeah,
they did.
So having to make weight 3 times in 8 weeks or whatever. Yeah, it's not always a great indicator of how these people are as fighters. But I was pleasantly surprised by Holobaugh, so hopefully that holds over. Next up at UFC 292 is a middleweight matchup between Gregory Rodrigues and Denis Tiuliulin. Rodrigues, the 31-year-old Brazilian, is 13-5 overall. He is 4-2 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series, though he was not signed immediately because he lost on that appearance. But since being in the UFC, 4-2, he's coming in off a loss. He got plunked late in the first round by Bruno Ferreira back at UFC 283 in January. So he's looking to get back on track, and he's looking to do it against Tiuliulin, who is coming in off a loss as well. 35-year-old Russian is 10-7 with 1 no contest overall. He's 1-2 in the UFC. He fought most recently at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Spivak in February, where he got choked all the way to sleep by Jin Young Park. Odds here favor Rodrigues heavily. He is minus 350, Tiuliulin plus 270. I'm not picking Denis Tiuliulin in this fight. But, I mean, anytime someone is as big an underdog, I mean, anytime we're talking about a 3-1 or bigger favorite, I do usually start out analysis by going, okay, if the underdog wins this, how does it look? Like what would have to happen? And Rodrigues has been hittable on the feet. He has been hurt on the feet by single hard shots by people. Like Bruno Ferreira flatlined him. His loss on the Contender Series, Jordan Williams, I mean, he had to follow up, but it was one big shot that like really started the ball rolling. So, and even in his wins, you know, like some of his opponents have like kind of stood him up with a single strike and kind of forced him into plan B. Tiuliulin as a kickboxer with good power, good reach, good fundamentals, he could do that. But that really is a remote possibility, I'm thinking. Because as you know, as porous as Rodriguez's defense has been on the feet, it usually gets that way when he gets overeager. And the compensation on the other side is that offensively, he's a nasty striker just because of his power and aggression. And then on top of that, a surprisingly good wrestler. Again, more of a power wrestler than, you know, somebody who came up through a long amateur career and knows how to chain takedowns. But, you know, it's been generally effective. And then good kind of strongman bully, topside submission type ground game. All of that just seems like poison for Tiuliulin to me. I think Rodrigues probably could hang out on the feet and beat Tiuliulin that way. But if he does, I think that puts him at unnecessary risk. You know, if he gets caught with one big punch from the Russian, that could turn this whole fight on a dime. If he hangs out too long and Tiuliulin starts chopping at his legs, that could create problems. I expect Rodrigues will do the smart thing here and try to take Tiuliulin down within the first 90 seconds of this fight. I think he gets the takedown. And from there, I haven't seen much that makes me think Tiuliulin's getting back up. I think this is over in the first round. Give me Gregory Rodrigues by first round TKO, ground and pound.
Yeah, I mean, Gregory Rodrigues, man, every time he takes a step forward, it looks like he's, you know, on his way to being a contender. He takes a step back. I think it's kind of now is the time for him. He better make the run now. He's a massive middleweight he's very aggressive on the feet. He's a pocket boxer with big power in both of his hands. He throws a lot of power hooks. The problem is he tends to load up and telegraph his shots, and you mentioned it, he lacks defense. He used to have a little bit of a granite chin, but I'm starting to worry about it. I mean, he was starched in his last fight. Now, he does well to close the distance and use his strength inside. As you mentioned, he's a better – I mean, even though he has power and he's some God-given tools, he's a good technical grappler. You know, if he gets inside, upper body takedowns, trips, throws, he can shoot from the outside. Though sometimes I've said this before, he kind of ducks his head and just shoots without setting things up. As you mentioned, he's more like a power wrestler than a technical wrestler. But if he grabs the leg – you know, he's so physically strong, especially early in the fight. He's probably going to go down. But strong grappler, very mean ground and pound. He's a legit submission threat. But he's one of these guys, he'll rush things, you know, he'll lose position, try to get a submission. And due to that, like, the physique and power of him, he tends to fade late, especially, you know, throwing big bombs and wrestling heavy. Tiuliulin, he's also a big middleweight. I mean, he's long and lengthy on the feet. He's got some high volume, pressure striking, pretty quick hands, works behind a jab. Good at sliding in the pocket and loading some power shots, but he can be dragged into a brawl, and he can get wild and throw a lot of haymakers. Now, he has decent power, especially when he goes to the body. I like his step and knees, and I like his kicks to the body. He's a good wrestler. Looks to advance position on the ground, but he's not a submission threat. He actually has been submitted in the past. In fact, I think it was last fight he was subbed by Jung Young Park. I think Tiuliulin is a little bit better than his. You know, when you watch him fight, you don't see these glaring holes. He's just missing something, and I still think he's levels below Rodrigues. If Rodrigues' chin holds up and his cardio holds up, I think he wins fairly easily. I think he has the more power. I think he's the better athlete. I think he's better on the ground. So. Give me Rodrigues. I think he's going to hurt him on the feet, and I think he's actually going to catch a sub too. So I think we might have like a club and sub situation. I'll say Rodrigues by first round submission.
Next up at UFC 292, as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, this is scheduled to be the top prelim, but considering that we've lost a main card fight, there's every possibility this gets bumped up to the main card. We'll see what happens, but it is a middleweight matchup between former champ Chris Weidman and perennial fringe contender Brad Tavares. Weidman, the 39-year-old Long Island native, is 15-6 overall. He's 11-6 in the UFC. He is, of course, the former UFC middleweight champ. He won the title back almost exactly 10 years ago with a second round knockout of Anderson Silva. He defended it several times against Silva, Machida, Vitor Belfort before surrendering it to Luke Rockhold. He last fought back in April of 2021 at UFC 261, where he lost in just 17 seconds to Uriah Hall by a gruesome lower leg break that was eerily similar to the one Silva inflicted on himself in their rematch back in 2014. He's been out ever since then. He had planned on being back sooner, but quite frankly, the recovery, the healing process did not go well. He ended up needing a second surgery to repair the tibia and fibula. It is finally now, 28 months later that he enters the cage once again. And waiting to greet him is Tavares. The 35-year-old Hawaiian is 19-8 overall. He's 14-8 since joining the UFC out of the 11th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He fought last July, dropping a unanimous decision to Dricus du Plessis, who has since thrust himself into the title picture at 185 pounds. And then he fought in April at UFC Fight Night, Pavlovich versus Blades, where he got knocked out in the first round by Bruno Silva. So Tavares definitely looking to get some redemption here. He's lost 4 of 6. Weidman has lost something like 6 of his last 8 and hasn't fought in over 2 years. So neither guy has a whole lot of momentum, but one guy has a lot more of the no momentum, and that would be Weidman, and he is a substantial underdog here. Tavares is minus 270, Weidman plus 220. I mean, Keith, Chris Weidman just turned 39 a month or two ago. He hasn't fought in over 2 years. He suffered what appeared to be a career-ending injury, or, I mean, nobody would have blamed him if it had been a career-ending injury against Uriah Hall. His only wins since dropping the title to Luke Rockhold way back in 2015 are over Kelvin Gastelum and Omari Akhmedov. I mean, Gastelum continues to be Kelvin Gastelum, and Omari Akhmedov walked out of the UFC. Aside from that, it's all losses. It's all knockout losses. And while it's been against a high level of competition, just Weidman hasn't looked good in most of these fights. I mean, I ask myself, okay, forget all that garbage. Like, don't think about that. Go back to the good days. When Chris Weidman was on his way up, when he was blowing through people in, like ROC, when he got to the UFC, when he won the title, what was Chris Weidman good at? Like, what made him good?
Yeah.
And it's that he wasn't the hugest middleweight, but he was an incredibly strong one. He was a good boxer. Like, he took to boxing really well. Just and very much like a boxer in MMA. Like, he had the whole BJ Penn or Rampage Jackson thing where he had a flat-footed stance and, kind of shuffled in and shuffled out, held his hands like a boxer with all the benefits and liabilities that implied. An elite wrestler. He was a good wrestler in college at Hofstra, and it translated to MMA and then some. Like, in his prime, he was an outstanding takedown artist. And perhaps most importantly, he is one of those wrestlers to whom grappling came just very instantly, very instinctively. Like, when he was, I don't even think he was in the UFC yet, or he might have just been freshly signed, when he went to Abu Dhabi, and he's taking on people like Andre Galvao and Vinny Magalhaes. And yeah, he lost to those guys, but it didn't look like he didn't belong in the gym with them. He just instantly slotted in as someone who could at least hang with the best grapplers on the planet. And then on top of that, just at least on his way up, he was incredibly tough. What's he got left now? I mean, he may still be a good boxer, but he can't afford to do it anymore because his chin and his recoverability are gone against anybody with power. I mean, there have been a couple of fights where he was doing well until he got caught by one big shot, and then it was all over. Like the Jacare fight, the Musasi fight, the Romero fight. And those fights are like 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't imagine his chin's gotten better since then. I don't know how his wrestling looks now. So I'm picturing a Weidman who it might be like the Tony Ferguson thing, where like he looks competitive until the first adversity comes his way, and then just all the wheels fall off the wagon. And he's facing someone in Tavares where I'm starting to get the first sneaking suspicion that Tavares is on the downslide. Like it seems like forever. It's literally been over a decade that he was going to be guy that was always going to win 3, lose 1, win 3, lose 1. So he could never really make it into the title picture, but he'd never really fall much below like that 15 spot. Like he was the ultimate gatekeeper to the middleweight top 10, but he got hurt real bad by Bruno Silva. Edmund Shabazian. I mean, Edmund Shabazian was kind of lightning in a bottle at the time they fought, but Tavares' durability is starting to wane as well. And Dricus du Plessis just kind of beat him at the Brad Tavares game. Like du Plessis was kind of the bigger, stronger guy when they got their hands on each other. He seemed to make Tavares a little bit gun shy on the feet. So Tavares doesn't have left what he used to anymore either. But I understand why the line is what it is, because I still think it's going to be way too much for Weidman. I can't imagine Weidman just coming out and shooting a beautiful double leg and taking Tavares down. And I think if this turns into a striking match on the feet, Weidman's never been good about checking leg kicks. I mean, it sounds mean. It sounds like some like Cobra Kai shit, but like if I'm Tavares, I'm starting to kick the legs. Yeah. And if Weidman is distracted by that at all, if he's worried about that leg at all, that just opens him up for maybe just the one big punch it takes to start everything rolling downhill. Like Tavares he has underrated power. Like his stoppages on the feet are usually due to an accumulation of damage, but I mean, his flush punches have made everybody kind of sit up and pay attention. I think Tavares probably busts Weidman up pretty badly here. It's not much fun to watch, but give me Tavares by second round TKO here, and it'll be after a first round where just nothing Weidman really tries seems to work very well, and the writing is kind of on the wall already.
Yeah, you talk about kicking his leg. Imagine if he fought John Jones, like what he would do to like,
Oh, like Jones would like get the leg and then slow motion you see him like bring up the elbow like like that thing from Bloodsport where Jean-Claude Van Damme's buddy gets killed.
Nice. Yeah, I just picture him like when the WWF wrestler puts the foot inside the chair somehow and then stomps on the chair with the ankle in between. So I was thinking about this fight and how to break it down and how to do a tape study of Weidman. And I'm like, wait a minute, I did a tape study of Weidman 2.5 years ago, and the fight lasted 70 seconds. Like, what did I really learn? So I figured I'm just gonna read my same notes and say, like, what the F? Like, who the only people who knows what he's gonna look like is the people in the gym with him. And even that I don't think they can be completely no, because fighting in the gym is different than fighting a UFC fighter trying to kill you. So Weidman before he was pretty light on his feet. Obviously that was before a massive leg injury. Oh, let me say something real quick. I don't know if you remember this because I'm asking you to go back a long time, but MMA Twitter can be. I generally have good interactions, but of course there's some terrible humans out there, especially behind the keyboards. Do you remember the amount of people that was like really happy when Chris Weidman broke his leg because, he checked the kick against Anderson Silva that broke Anderson Silva's leg, and maybe you were an Anderson Silva fan or whatever the reason is. Like somehow when Weidman broke Anderson Silva's leg, it was like he was so happy about it, or some like there was some kind of what's the word I'm looking for, like evil intent. That he really wanted him to put him on the shelf for that long, and this was karma and everything. Like, if you believe that, you're a dickhead. Yeah,
Yeah,
you know what
like
I mean?
you're stupid and you're mean spirited, and that's a terrible combination.
Like I remember Uriah Hall's reaction is exactly how everyone's reaction should be. Like, yeah, obviously, it's always good to win, but that's not how you want to win.
Right.
And no fault to his fault, no fault to him, but
no, he did exactly what he was supposed to do.
It's a freak thing that happens.
Yeah,
and I know people could wait at me and say there's a technique. Yeah, I understand that, but generally speaking, when someone throws a kick, that doesn't happen.
Right.
Okay, what are you gonna say?
No, just that, and I'm even willing to kind of look past what a fighter does in like the 5 seconds after something like that happens.
Exactly.
All the adrenaline is going through your body. I've seen people like just jump up on the fence and then realize, oh shit, this dude's really hurt bad.
Yeah.
And then the somber mood takes over. I pay more attention to what they're doing a minute later, 5 minutes later at the post-fight presser. Yeah. And dude, Uriah Hall is simultaneously the kindest, gentlest, and most terrifying human on the planet.
Yeah,
like if Uriah Hall was out there wanting to break people's bones, there'd be a lot more people with broken bones.
Yeah, no shit. So I mean, just something I thought of what we were talking about. So, what does Chris Weidman still do good 2.5 years ago, whatever it was? He still had he didn't get outpointed because of volume. Like his volume didn't fade. He worked behind a jab, though his hand speed definitely lost some speed. Though he was never the fastest puncher to begin with, but he was a tight boxer that kind of rolled with punches well and had a good, intelligent game plan. He could still wrestle, good entries, like to get up in body locks and get the takedowns there. One of the, when you look about a guy with a resume in wrestling, not the most credentialed wrestler, when you think about all the guys from NCAA who came over, but one of the guys who adapted his wrestling to MMA so well. I mean, he's a good grappler. I mean, heavy on top, advancing on the ground, a submission threat. He used to love attacking like head, I always like to call the head attack subs, front headlock game, has serious submission. But we talk about this injury and this broken leg, but don't forget, he had like a slew of injuries before that. He was always injured.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's had neck fusion surgery before he broke his leg. Like the dude still has like a Frankenstein scar on the back of his neck. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the one thing, you say about him, you just worried. I thought his chin was going 2.5 years. I agree with you saying, like, I don't expect his chin to get better. Now, move on to Brad Tavares. He's a good boxer. He's pretty tactical. He uses feints well. Strong kind of slip and rip guy. I'd say stinging power, but it was never the biggest hitter, which is surprising because he's built well, and he does have good like foot positioning. Now, and a good base underneath him when he throws. He likes to work from the outside, but he can also slide in the pocket and throw down. He makes a mistake of backing straight up and playing his back against the cage, which showed against Duplessis, instead of circling away. He's got an underrated kicking game. I like his kicks to the body. I like his calf kick. He can wrestle, but he doesn't wrestle much. It's more opportunistic or, a strategy like winning rounds by sneaking a takedown in late. Though I doubt he tries to wrestle Chris Weidman. I mean, that'd be a wrestling match would be the best case scenario for Chris Weidman. Though I do wonder how much Chris Weidman can wrestle at this point. Like we've talked about this ad nauseum, that why does so many wrestlers stop wrestling late in their career? Because it's a really hard thing to do, but Tavares always had a pretty good takedown defense. We talk about his wrestling. He's more of a sprawl brawl kind of guy. I go back to like Antonio Carlos Jr. and Mario Akhmadov fight. He beat those guys in back-to-back fights. No, this is probably like 3 years ago or something like that. But that was, showing he was able to sprawl and brawl against guys with, grappling backgrounds, guys who want to get around. But I'm with you, and I've said this before about Brad Tavares. My biggest issue with him is I think his chin is fading. I mean, he was knocked out in his last fight. He's been hurt in other fights. So Tavares is probably the highest level fighter that Weidman might be able to beat now. And if he's equal to what he was 2.5 years ago, especially if Tavares' durability is gone, I want Weidman to win. And there's nothing against Brad Tavares. I mean, it was the other way around, and Brad Tavares was coming back from, this crazy break. I'd probably say the same thing. I can't trust a comeback run from a 39-year-old coming off major injury plus tons of other injuries in a 2-6 run over his last 8. I think Tavares picks him apart from range. I think he stuffs some takedowns, and I think he finishes them. You said second round. I thought about going late, but I don't think it even goes late. I think Tavares might do in the very first round. Give it Tavares by first round TKO.
Next up at UFC 292, and we're fairly certain this is on the main card, is Marlon Vera versus Pedro Munhoz in a bantamweight scrap. Vera, the 30-year-old Ecuadorian, is 28-1 overall. He is 14-7 in the UFC. He's coming into this fight off of a loss. He most recently fought in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 43 against Corey Sandhagen back in March, dropped the split decision. Prior to that, he had been on a 4-fight win streak that got him into the Sandhagen fight, which was effectively a probable title eliminator. He's going to try to reclaim some of that momentum, underscore that he still is a factor in this division. He had been scheduled to take on former 2-division champ Henry Cejudo, but Cejudo dropped out in July, and in comes Pedro Munhoz. Cejudo dropped out all the way like 4th of July weekend, so Munhoz has had close to a full camp here, but definitely not quite the name level of opponent that Vera was hoping for. Nonetheless, Munhoz, 36-year-old Brazilian, is 20-7 with 2 no contests overall. He is 10-7 with 2 no contests in the UFC, and he actually won his last time out. He appeared to be in one of the uglier tailspins in the UFC over the last couple of years, but he fought at UFC on ESPN Holloway versus Allen back in April, took a unanimous decision over Chris Gutierrez, and that allowed him to put a run with only 1 win in his last 6 fights in the rear view. Munhoz would love nothing better than to rack up a second straight win, but he is not favored to do so. Vera is minus 185 as your favorite. Munhoz plus 145 on the comeback. Keith, Marlon Vera wants to prove that he hasn't hit his ceiling, that he still is a factor in the title picture here. Munhoz, I imagine, just wants to prove that he still can fight at a UFC level, that he's not completely washed. Who gets it done here and how?
Yeah, well, I mean, if he beats Marlon Vera, he won't just prove that he can fight at UFC level. He'll prove that he's still one of the upper echelon guys. Would be hell of a feat at 36 years old. Munhoz, he's, I'm disappointed. So being there live, I'm disappointed not seeing a guy like Henry Cejudo fight live. But I think this is probably the best replacement they could do at this point. Munhoz is a high output fighter who's constantly moving forward, taking ground. Pace and output is his tool. He beats guys with his pressure, though he did lose to Jose Aldo because he refused to step on the gas, a fight that he could have won, which is really just surprising. I mean, something that might have been a little bit of the moment fighting.
He was,
alleged.
Dude, I'll get to it when I talk about this, but I think he was starstruck.
That's what I was looking for. Yeah, he might have been a little starstruck, which is because he fought so differently. He's got a sharp jab that he works behind, that he's to slide in the pocket and unload some power shots. He's always been willing to eat, a shot to land some of his own, and he has a solid chin. He's been in so many battles. You can go to like the ones that he didn't go as well at all. Aljamain Sterling was really teed off on him, but that's because he's when he was probably in his prime, he always has some defensive. Number one thing is he kind of squares up a little bit, make himself a big target. Now he's got nice pop. I love his kicking game. Hard kicks to the body, some of the best calf kicks in the game. Though he doesn't check leg kicks. Aljo really beat him up with leg kicks. I was surprised how much he struggled with the speed of Dominic Cruz, the movement and the speed. And that has to do with him being one of the worst athletes in the top 15. Like sometimes hard work and skill get you so far. You supposed to have some God-given attributes, which I don't think he was given. Now, he's always been an underrated grappler, though he doesn't wrestle enough. though to his credit, he did show some wrestling against Chris Gutierrez, which is smart. Vera, on the other hand, long, lengthy southpaw. He's a bit of a builder who gets stronger as the fight goes on. But we just talked about Pedro Munhoz being starstruck. I don't think Marlon Vera was starstruck against Corey Sandhagen, but he didn't throw as much as he did, and suddenly it was like, oh crap, it's the last round and I'm down. Let me kind of pick up the pace, and it was a little too late for him. He's usually the one who pressing the action, constantly moving forward, constantly coming off the cage. He has good power, but you go to the Dominic Cruz fight. He dropped Dominic Cruz 3 times in that fight. Has nice kicks. Defense has always been an issue. Very hittable. That's because he keeps his hands low. Sandhagen really was tearing him up with his boxing. He will wrestle a little bit, but definitely not a wrestler. And he's a weak defensive wrestler, but pretty good grappler. He's got some sweeps. He's got some submissions off his back, some slick back takes. He has 8 submissions in his career, and he's got some mean ground and pound, and he has a mean streak to him. Like Marlon Vera, we've talked about this before. He comes off as this happy-go-lucky guy before, like when he was on the Ultimate Fighter and all that early in the UFC. Now he's like I want to murder people. So I got to go with Vera here. I think we'll have some good exchanges on the feet, especially from the kicking range with 2 really good kickers. But it's Vera's power that I trust more. I'm not sure about Munhoz being a top guy anymore. So I say Vera not only wins, but I think Vera catches him. I say Vera knocks him out in the 3rd round. Something that is be a hell of a feat to knock out a guy like Pedro Munhoz, no matter what time of his career. I think Vera gets it. Vera by 3rd round TKO.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with that last observation. It is saying a lot that these 2 guys, Marlon Vera and Pedro Munhoz, given how long they've been fighting at the highest level, the kind of guys they fought. They fought essentially a who's who of the best this division has to offer over the last, 8 years or so. And especially in Vera's case, how he fights. Aggressive, face first, angry. It is shocking that neither of these guys has been stopped ever. Like that's saying a lot. Like, Pedro Munhoz, even mired in a pretty bad losing streak there, fighting some heavy hitters, just, never finished. He always looked like he'd been hit with a chainsaw at the end of his fights, but, never finished. Vera, he's come against some of the hardest hitters the division has, again, face first, and he's always been able to trust his own durability to carry the day. But if one of these guys is going to get finished, I think you've made the right call. And the time might be right because, Munhoz got that win over Gutierrez that almost certainly saved his roster spot. He was almost certainly going to get cut if he lost. And he did it by fighting a little bit uncharacteristically for himself. I just don't know if that approach would work on Marlon Vera. And I know that Munhoz's general approach from all the way up to a couple years ago definitely won't. I do think this matchup favors Vera. He's bigger. He's neither of them is a jump out of the gym athlete, but Vera's definitely more of an athlete and closer to his prime. He's a much harder hitter. And he, like you said, he's a deceptively good ground fighter. Like, he got to the UFC because of Tough at age 21 and has kind of learned how to fight with the lights on, but he's not that raw prospect anymore. And he's always been deceptively good on the ground. So Munhoz, he'll probably have his chances to take advantage of Vera's aggression and defensive lapses on the feet, but Munhoz isn't the kind of guy that's going to be able to make him pay in fight-changing ways, I don't think. And if it goes to the ground, Vera's fast and nasty on the ground. He's equally happy setting up in top position and being methodical and hurting people while advancing position, or getting into a wild scramble and just trusting that he'll come out better for it. This is a bad matchup for Munhoz. I think this is a good fight for Vera. Obviously would still be wishing he were fighting Henry Cejudo, but it'll be a good fight for him to bounce back and show that he is making adjustments from fight to fight. And at 30, he still hasn't peaked. You called for Vera to get the TKO win, which again would be Munhoz's first stoppage loss of his career, but I'm on board with that, actually. give me Vera by third round TKO, just an accumulation of damage, wearing down Munhoz, and finally maybe even just gets like the referee mercy stoppage. We head now to the welterweight division for a matchup between Neil Magny and Ian Garry. Magny, the 36-year-old Chicago native fighting out of Colorado, is 28-10 overall. He's 21-9 since joining the UFC out of the 16th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He is coming into this fight off of a win. He took a split decision over Phil Rowe at UFC on ABC, Emmett versus Topuria back in June. He's stepping up here on what will end up being about 10 or 11 days notice. Garry had been scheduled to fight Jeff Neal. Neal dropped out, and we went a couple of days while the UFC sort of scrambled for a replacement opponent. Plenty of people on social media were clamoring for Stephen Thompson to get the call, since he very famously refused to fight an overweight opponent just a week before that. But for whatever reason, that was not made, and Magny stepped in. He'll attempt to be the first to hang a loss on the man who calls himself the future. 25-year-old Irishman is a perfect 12-0 overall. He's a perfect 5-0 since joining the UFC as a former multi-division Cage Warriors champ. He fought most recently in May, knocking out Danny Rodrigues in the first round with a head kick. Odds here, unsurprisingly, favor Garry. He's the biggest favorite on the card. In fact, he is minus 425. Magny around plus 320. Keith, obviously, what goes into preparing for a fight against Jeff Neal and what goes into preparing for a fight against Neil Magny are two very, very different things. I mean, the threats they pose are, I mean, if it was a Venn diagram, it almost doesn't overlap at all. Like the ways Neil Magny beats people, the way Jeff Neal beats people don't really line up at all. Mm-hmm. If the odds makers are to be believed, Magny's only real hope here lies in Ian Garry being unable to make those adjustments on short notice. Do you think there's anything to that? Do you think we have the potential to learn anything about Garry here? Could this at least be the kind of win where we see him face some adversity he hasn't faced before? Like, tell me how you think this one goes.
Yeah, so I'm going to say this right now. You know, Magny's one of our guys. Magny shouldn't be that big of a underdog against anybody. You know, not. I understand that Garry should be the favorite. I mean, again, he's the nice prospect, the next big thing, and all this. But Neil Magny's still tricky.
Magny was Magny was less of an underdog than this to Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Yeah. No, in fairness, he had a full camp for Rakhmonov. This is really short. So, I mean, it's like apples and oranges. But my point is, I get it, like the disrespect of Magny because he is what he is. But, like, you should have seen Magny enough to know that he's tricky, test. That alone, if you asked me to set the line, I still would have put Garry like negative 220 or something like that. But negative 400 or something, that's craziness. Yeah, I'm a Magny fan, so he won't beat the elite of the division, but he beats everyone else. Now, he isn't a guy that impresses you with his skill, but he just makes up with the volume. He turns up the volume when his opponent starts to fade. He's the fighter whose cardio is a tool and his best weapon. I've said it before, he'll start off at a normal pace, but by the third round, he's almost in a full sprint. I've said this. I think his overall skills and speed are slowing. I mean, I think it's been 3 or 4 fights in a row now that I think I've seen his skill kind of decline. But his toughness, his mentality, his IQ, just ramps up even more. As he has this unbelievable will to beat guys that he shouldn't beat. Now, like I said, he won't beat the elite of the elite because that can only take you so hard. But I mean, go back to the Danny Rodrigues fight where he just beat him with his mentality. He's a long and lengthy fighter that can pop shot from range, crisp jab. Very short. He fights from distance. He's like short, tight shots, not a lot of tells. I like his teep kicks. I like his calf kicks. I love his stepping knees, especially getting inside with his height, grabbing the back of the head and blasting away. Now he has some defense. He pulls his head straight back. His head stays on the center line. I love when I've said this about Neil Magny a million times. I probably could continue to say that. I love when opponents getting punching range. He's smart enough to grab and initiate the clinch and work and use his size. He'll grind and clinch. He loves that position. Battering his opponent with knees and elbows. He's also good at just like these little small things he does inside. Like he'll hit a slide by to get his back. If he did to Danny Rodrigues, he did it. What's his last fight? He did it against Phil Rowe.
Mm-hmm.
He's an underrated offensive wrestler. I mean, he took down Danny Rodrigues much of that fight. Relentless with the mat returns, but he has struggled with the elite grapplers. Prime Michael Cassia, RDA, Shafkat Romanov, Gilbert Burns. They've all taken him down and dominated on the ground. And while Neil Magny, like again, we just saw him recently. We always see Neil Magny recently. They have like long layoffs, but I am worried that one day finally like this could be the Jenga puzzle. Like you keep pulling the pieces and eventually it's going to topple over. He's built that way too. So, that could fall apart at all times. Ian Machado Garry is a huge welterweight, long and lengthy, very athletic, good footwork, moves well, very good striker. He's a builder who gets stronger every fight. His confidence seems to be building. Like he has this utter massive belief in himself, which is incredible. He obviously gets compared to Conor McGregor because of the Irish thing, but they're both obviously was great skilled fighters. They come in different personalities, but the confidence is there. Like the moment is not too big. He really believes like this is his time. Very relaxed on the feet, technical on the feet, likes to work from range with his size, but he's got quick hands. He's accurate. I like his stiff jab, throws some good combinations, slips and rips well. I love that he batters the body, good head movement. He needs to have good head movement because it kind of baits his opponents by keeping his hands low. But what I love, and we're seeing it recently, is this guy he's young, but he's coming into his power now. He's hurting guys. His step and knees, keep his opponents on the outside so they can't get inside. Great kicking game, inside kicks, calf kicks, high kick. We saw that in his last fight, Danny Rodrigues, incredible high kick. Okay, he's got a judo background, so he'll occasionally look for a takedown. Good top game, good ground and pound. He does attack submissions like head attacks, Darce chokes, anaconda, stuff like that. And he's shown that he has cardio as the fight goes on. I was one of the guys when Ian Garry first came to the UFC and was getting a lot of hype. I was kind of pumping my brakes on because I didn't really like what I saw on the regional scene. Like, I definitely saw a UFC talent, but I didn't think I had a UFC champion. There were some things that he needed to clean up. But it just reminds me when guys are young, more look for the athleticism and the raw tools because that other stuff will come. So I had this like bit of a wait and see approach with him, but that's not the case now. I'm all in on Ian Garry. Beating Neil Magny is a hell of an accomplishment. It's one of those ones where it's a win on your record that probably won't get talked about as enough as it should be. But if you beat Neil Magny, you're elite. Most people call that a gatekeeper. I hate using the word gatekeeper because there's so many different definitions for that. But beating Neil Magny makes you elite. I think Ian Garry is elite. I'm going to go bold. I'm going to say this historic rise is going to continue. I would say he does something that very few people do to Neil Magny, and I think he hurts Neil Magny. I think he puts him out with strikes. I think he's going to hurt him, maybe drop him, and then finish up with follow-up strikes. Give me Garry by second round TKO.
Yeah, I love the breakdown there. I also just instantly some like warning lights go off when I see that somebody is a greater than 4-1 favorite over Neil Magny, but you really summed up well like what makes Garry so promising. And it's funny. Yes, the McGregor comparisons are going to be there, but aside from not lacking for self-confidence and being from Ireland, the similarities kind of stop there. Like Garry is a confident guy but he's not brash. He's not.
Yeah, that's fair.
And he's
it's more Volkanovski, where it's utter like self-belief.
Oh, that's a fantastic comparison. It's much more like Volkanovski, like Garry, and Garry's, at least at this point, he's like the last guy you would picture hearing about him being in like a drunken brawl, like a coke fueled, some weird coke fueled escapade.
Stephen Thompson might be my last pick.
Okay,
but, Garry, or maybe Robert Whitaker.
Things have been pretty quiet since Thompson pulled out of that fight 2 weeks ago. Maybe that
all right.
The church bus is in a ditch off of I-80 in Kansas right now.
All right, fine. I'll still give it to Robert Whitaker, but Garry might be my second choice.
No, but I mean, Garry, and I don't want to read too much into intangibles, but Garry's got stability. He's 25 years old, and like he shares last names with his wife, and she's clearly like an equal partner to him in kind of his professional endeavors. Like, and I think for the most part, while MMA does attract plenty of misfits and miscreants and like, antisocial people, generally speaking, just stability makes the training and fighting part of somebody's job easier. He's the kind of guy that, he's undefeated, but I don't see his psyche just crumbling and all the wheels falling off the wagon the first time he loses a fight. Like, because we've seen that. We've seen fighters that it was clearly really tough for them to adjust mentally after their first loss. Ronda Rousey, Shane Carwin, Macy Barber, Darren Till. Sure. Garry's gonna lose a fight at some point. I don't think he's gonna retire 30-0, but you know what? I think he'll probably just, whenever that happens, whether it's this weekend or it's 2 years down the road in some title defense, I think he'll probably just dust himself off and go back to the drawing board. I like that he's moved his training to Kill Cliff. I mean, just the fact that he's down there, if he's at Kill Cliff, that means he's working on a weekly basis with like Gilbert Burns, Logan Storley, Robbie Lawler, like just a great group of kind of guys in his general size range to really like round out his skills. I agree with you that he's really just growing into his power. Like, being the athlete he is and being like fundamentally sound as a striker, you knew the power was coming, and I think it's starting to show in his last couple fights. Just all that spells bad stuff for Magny, because Magny is one of the ultimate guys that he has no bad losses, but he's lost badly. Because you look over his, his UFC career, he's lost 9 times in the UFC. Like, the people he's lost to, none of them are bad, but all those losses were bad. Like, the fights that went past the first round, like Ponzinibbio won every single round before knocking him out. Like RDA and Rachmanov and Burns like dominated every moment of the fight on the ground until they tapped him out. Because Magny's that ultimate well-rounded guy. Like, in every category of MMA, he's a 6 or a 7. If you're better than a 6 or 7 at one of those, and you can force Magny into fighting on your terms, you can generally do work on him. I see Garry being able to do that, and I actually see this being a fight where, aside from maybe in the clinch against the cage, there aren't many places where Magny's going to be able to hold his own for very long. I think Garry's going to hurt him if they hang out on the feet at distance for very long. I think if it goes to the ground, Garry's going to be just stronger, faster. Ugh. Yeah, it pains me to say this, because like I've enjoyed following Magny for a long, long time now, but kind of like a couple people we've talked about on this card, I think this is where, we're going to start to see that the wheels really have started to fall off. I feel like we said that about Gerald Meerschaert, Brad Tavares. I think Magny at this point, with so many fights under his belt, is entering that category as well. And he's entering a realm in terms of age and in terms of mileage where a short turnaround like this, a fast weight cut, is probably going to tell on him as well. Give me Garry to win this one. I'm going to say he gets it done in the second round. But if Magny's losses over the last few years are any indication, it's probably going to be all one-way traffic until then. I'm going to say Garry by second round TKO. The co-main event of UFC 292 is a strawweight title fight between defending champ Weili Zhang and the challenger Amanda Lemos. Zhang, the 34-year-old from China, is 23-3 overall. She is 7-2 in the UFC. She's on a 2-fight win streak. She lost back-to-back fights in 2021 when she surrendered her title to Rose Namajunas and then came up short in their rematch. But since then, she has a second round knockout of Joanna Jędrzejczyk last June, and last November, a second round submission of Carla Esparza, thus becoming the UFC strawweight champ for the second time. This will be the first defense of her newly re-won title, and the challenger is Lemos. 36-year-old Brazilian is 13-2-1 overall. Like the champ, she is 7-2 in the UFC, but she's 7-1 at strawweight. She made her debut 6 years ago against Leslie Smith. That was up at 135 pounds. That did not go well for her, but since then, she is 7-1 in the strawweight division. Her only loss came a little over a year ago to Jessica Andrade, who choked her out with a standing arm triangle choke in one of the best submissions of last year. But since then, she has back-to-back wins over Michelle Waterson-Gomez and Maryna Rodrigues. The most recent of those, the Rodrigues fight, was in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 214 last November. So Lemos wants to make it her third win in a row, obviously the biggest of her career, as she'll be fighting for gold. She is not favored to get it done here. Zhang is a minus 330 favorite, Lemos plus 240 as the underdog. Keith.
Jeez.
Yeah, well, hey.
Did you say negative 330 favorite?
Yep, Zhang is minus 330.
That's nuts.
Well,
wow, that's nuts.
I mean, give it to me here. If Lemos pulls off what apparently, according to the odds makers, would be a shocker, what does it look like? Like, what are her most likely avenues to victory?
She punches in the face really, really hard.
Well, all right.
Like, that's what she does well, though. I mean, if you had me guessing the odds, I knew Weili was going to be the favorite. I would have guessed like negative 160. Like, Amanda Lemos is good. That's why I'm wow, just surprised by that. Really, really surprised. I mean, I understand there's more to betting than just, what's the chances of winning. I know some of it has to do with how to get people to bet, but I'm very surprised by that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, tell me how you think this one actually plays out.
Yeah. So before we talk about it, this is a fight. They're fighting for the title. Is anybody talking about this fight? No. There's no buzz on this fight at all. And I know it, maybe in China there might be a lot of buzz, or maybe in some parts of Brazil, even though I'd be surprised in Brazil because they've had so many stars, but I'm sure it's popular in China. But that said, I get it. You have two fighters that are American and they don't speak English. I know Weili speaks a little bit of English, and Maryna says she doesn't speak any English, correct?
I mean, I've never heard her really try.
Okay, I apologize if I'm being what's the word we're gonna be? I don't know, just being dumb, and maybe she does speak English. But my point is, like,
no, it's not like Pedro Munhoz where when he talks, you're like, oh, dude.
Yeah. I apologize if that's the case.
No. Like, Pedro Munhoz speaks better English than I do. Yeah. Like, no, but I've never even heard Lemos try. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I get it. They don't connect with the casual fans. My friends messaging me this week. They'll message me about. I mean, they already have Sterling and O'Malley. As it gets closer, Thursday, Friday, they'll ask me more about that. I don't think I'll get many questions about this fight, but on paper, it might be the better fight for the title fights. Apparently not according to the betting. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that because I don't know what the Sterling O'Malley betting line is yet, but I'm going to guess it's not this big. I'll wait in anticipation to see what you say, but Weili Zhang, she's very well rounded. She moves well. She has good volume. She throws mean combinations. When she gets in the pocket, she unloads huge shots. I mean, she's one of the pound for pound hardest hitters in women's MMA. I mean, she can crack. She's straight starch Jessica Andrade. I mean, go back to the first Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight. I mean, she butchered Joanna to the point where if you take a picture of Joanna Jędrzejczyk of that, you wouldn't recognize her if you didn't watch the fight. She had a KO of the year in her knockout of Joanna in their second fight. Of course, that was a spinning back fist, but still, she mixes punches and kicks into combinations well, which I like. She does have some defense. She eats a lot of shots. Now, she is really good on the ground, which was not always the case. I mean, she was always solid, but now she's becoming a real threat on the ground. Nice clinch takedowns, nice trip takedowns, good at winning scrambles. I mean, she took Rose Namajunas down 5 times in this second fight. Good top game. She dominated Jessica Aguilar on the ground. She subbed Carlos Esparza in the last fight, who Carlos Esparza is one of the greatest grapplers in women's MMA history. And Weili, one point she had like crucifix and had her arm trapped in all kinds of positions. I mean, she looked fantastic in her last fight. Amanda Lemos, she's a great athlete. That's the first thing that stands out to me, is just an athlete, which is funny because she's 36 years old. She shouldn't be the explosive athlete. On the flip side, Weili Zhang's 34. She's older than I thought she would be. I would have guessed, 31 or something like that. So, Lemos, very explosive, very fast. One of the best jabs in women's MMA. It's a bit of an up jab that she throws from her hips. She uses feints well to set up her counters. She likes to get in the pocket and throw some hard, tight hooks. Has serious power. I mean, we saw what she did to Maryna Rodrigues. Great kicking game, nice calf kicks. She can battle well in the clinch. She smashed Livana Souza inside the clinch, landed some nasty elbows. She has a judo background, nice throws. She hit Maryna Rodrigues with incredible leg sweep. Strong ground and pound, strong top game. She has a submission threat. I mean, she submitted Michelle Waterson with a beautiful guillotine, which was, not the peak of Michelle Waterson, but still a pretty good bet. I already expressed my dislike of I don't want to say dislike, but my just surprise of the Vegas lines. I think they're way off. I think both these girls are really, really good. I think they're two of the best. To me, this should be close to pick 'em. I mean, Weili without being a favorite, but it should be much closer than what the lines are saying. I feel like Lemos, even before you told me the betting lines, that she was being extremely overlooked. When we talk about the division, we're talking about Yan Xinan, we're talking about Tatiana Suarez, we're talking about maybe Weili moving up. We're talking about everything but Amanda Lemos. And I've seen Weili Zhang get clipped before. And you know what? I'm going to say Lemos does it. I think we get some crazy exchange in the feet, and I think Lemos is the one who lands the power shot. I'm going to say Lemos pulls up this massive upset, and I'm going to say Lemos knocks her out in the third round. Amanda Lemos by third round TKO.
Man, I like that pick a lot. I've been going back and forth on this one all week because, there's a huge favorite in this fight. There's a pretty substantial favorite in the headliner that I'll when we get to it, I'll leave you to guess whether the line is wider or narrower. But of the two fights, this is the one where the underdog has the more clear and feasible path to victory. Like, I absolutely agree. It's why I asked you, what does it look like if Lemos as a 3-1 underdog wins? It's like, well, yeah, she punches her in the face really hard. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say, because it's what she does to people, and people have done it to Weili Zhang in the past. She's been hit cleanly by quite a few of her opponents, but arguably none with the one-shot power that Lemos has. And Zhang is almost certain to give Lemos the kind of fight where she's going to have those chances. This fight is almost certainly going to have extended sequences of boxing in the pocket, where Lemos is going to get a chance to land one of those hooks that, at risk of sounding like a UFC hype reel, she only needs to land one of. I'm still leaning Zhang here, just because she's looked so dominant against proven fighters who won their way to face her with legit wins, like Joanna Jędrzejczyk in their second fight, like Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza had so much positive momentum coming into their fight. She was her career.
The fight to win the title wasn't the greatest.
No. But I'm just
she's the way she beat her, to me, speaks more.
Yeah. But Zhang kind of proved herself the equal of one of the best ground fighters in the history of the division. And then before that, she proved herself way too much for one of the greatest strikers in the history of the division. I would never count Lemos out of this fight. She has such power. She's so explosive, and she's proven that she has the ability to apply that power. But at least through 3 rounds, I mean, it was still anybody's fight when she lumped Maryna Rodrigues in her last fight. Like, they were at 1 round apiece, and it was still just back and forth on the feet. But Lemos hit her squarely once, and that was all it took. Like, the thing was over 10 seconds later. I would never rule out the possibility that she could do that to Weili Zhang. My hope for Zhang is that she does a good job of, mixing in her takedowns here, gives Lemos something to think about, something to maybe keep her, her hands down a little bit. But yeah, I'm going with the champ here to defend successfully. Give me Zhang by decision here, and it's probably like a 48-47 thing where she's in serious trouble in at least 1 round, maybe 2, and we get a thing where it's still anybody's fight in the 5th round. That brings us to the main event of UFC 292, a men's bantamweight title fight between defending champ Aljamain Sterling and the challenger Sugar Sean O'Malley. Sterling, the 34-year-old New York native, is 23-3 overall. He is 15-3 in the UFC. He is on a 9-fight win streak since getting knocked out cold by Marlon Moraes back almost 6 years ago. He won the title about 2.5 years ago over Petr Yan. Since then, he's defended it 3 times against Yan, TJ Dillashaw, and most recently, Henry Cejudo. The Cejudo fight was in the headliner of UFC 288 back in May. So Sterling will look to defend the title for the 4th time, moving into sole possession of the UFC record for most bantamweight title defenses. Opposing him in that attempt will be O'Malley. The 28-year-old Montana native by way of Arizona is 16-1 with 1 no contest overall. He's 8-1 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 5-fight unbeaten streak consisting of 4 wins and a no contest against Munhoz, who appeared a little earlier on this card. In his most recent fight at UFC 280 last October, he took a split decision over Petr Yan. There are a vocal few out there who thought Yan should have won the fight, but however you scored it, he's the one that went down as the winner, and he earned the right to challenge for the title here. Odds do favor the champ. Keith, in the co-main, Weili Zhang was minus 330, Amanda Lemos plus 240. Is the line in the headlining fight between Sterling and O'Malley wider or closer than that?
I'm going to guess closer. Yeah, I mean, that first one was pretty wild.
You are correct, sir. Sterling is minus 275, O'Malley plus 225 as your underdog. And I think that's interesting because on some levels, Aljamain Sterling is about as disrespected a fighter as for as dominant as he's been for the things he's accomplished as I can think of in UFC history. But that line tells me that when it really counts, when it comes to people laying down their hard-earned money, the fans maybe respect him a little more than they're letting on, because there's no shortage of people out there calling him, a paper champ, a scared champ, a guy who got lucky. But and I'm gonna get to those accusations, but I'm not sure where those folks are when it comes time to pick up some easy money by betting on O'Malley at plus 225, because if enough of them were doing it, the line wouldn't be what it is. Here's the thing. Like, Sterling, for whatever reason, for a variety of reasons, is a pretty unpopular champ, on the social media fandom, in the arena, depending on which arena he happens to be in when the camera pans over to him. And part of that is things that, I won't belabor here, but maybe they say more about the fans in question than about Sterling. But I will say that it's possible to look at his title run so far, and there's asterisks hanging on everything. In his last 4 fights, that's him winning the title and defending it 3 times. You've got him winning by disqualification. You've got 2 split decisions, and you've got a TKO win over and obviously compromised fighter who should never have been in there in the first place. Problem is, none of that is Sterling's fault. Like,
yeah, that's right.
It wasn't his, like the illegal knee from Jan. It's not like it was his choice. And I know there was plenty of narrative about, oh, he could have gone on. He was scared. He was bailing out because he was losing. Well, once Jan landed that knee and the ref determined that it was significant, it wasn't up to whether Sterling wanted to continue anymore or not. Like it rightly was and should have been out of his hands. Similarly, it's not his fault that TJ Dillashaw pulled a all-time scumbag move and basically hid a severe injury like throughout his camp. Like that's all Sterling is.
I don't know, a scumbag. Poor, I'd say I put him more poor sport.
Yeah, okay. It's, you know what? I probably only called it a scumbag move because I already thought Dillashaw was a scumbag.
Okay,
if it was someone else, I would have been
fair enough. All right, yeah, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, but certainly a selfish move. You know, it shortchanged Sterling. It shortchanged the rest of the queue of contenders. You know, basically the only person that really helped was Dillashaw. Like, none of those things are Sterling's fault. All he's done is go out against whoever the UFC trots out against him and do his best to beat them. Here against O'Malley, the stakes are obvious for O'Malley. Like, here's put up or shut up time. Like, O'Malley has a loss that he can kind of hang his own asterisk on because, he obviously hurt himself early in the Vera fight. He has the no contest against Munhoz where, he was definitely beating Munhoz, but it was his fault that the thing ended. So he's gotten like winged here and there, but in his own mind, he's still undefeated. He has a chance to back up all the bluster, back up all the talk in the biggest fight of his career, pick up the title. Obviously, the move from like budding star to established superstar. I mean, this might be all it takes to complete that trip for O'Malley, but Sterling's got a lot at stake as well. Like, he's on the verge of breaking the UFC record for most defenses of the bantamweight title. He already has the record for most consecutive defenses because both Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw split their defenses across 2 different reigns. And he's still looking for his first real uncontroversial win, or win without any sort of if and or but attached to it. So, I mean, he's got to be highly motivated, not just to beat O'Malley, but to beat him in a way that leaves no questions, so that he can either move up to 145, and feel good about it, or stay at 135 and we get this weird like feud and he or Moroz moves to a different camp. I don't know what the hell. Well, that's something for the recap. At any rate, kind of like Lemos against Zhang, O'Malley has things he can do to win this fight that don't necessarily require Sterling to make a huge mistake. Like Sterling, he's a good striker, but his greatest vulnerabilities are definitely still on the feet. A lot of his recent opponents have hit him squarely. Obviously, he has like the just brutal knockout loss to Marlon Moraes, even if that was years ago. But if somebody could land a single head kick on this guy, or land a single knee on him as he shoots and just put him all the way out, knockout of the year type thing, O'Malley is, if not the top guy in the division that you'd want to pick to try to do that, he's top 2 or 3. Whatever his detractors may say about his persona, whatever, O'Malley is a sniper of a striker. I know he's one of your favorite fighters to do tape on, and he's got a little of the next level striking thing that someone like Israel Adesanya does, where you watch him and you realize that he's a step ahead even of good strikers that he faces. That, he's playing a long game, drawing people onto his power strikes. It's a lot like Conor McGregor on the way up when he was such a brilliant striker, where, he would use his kicks to kind of herd his people into his left hook. O'Malley's got a lot of that, and it's why so many of his knockouts are just breathtaking to behold, because he's been sizing up his opponent for it for most of a round or for a round and a half, and they're surprised when it comes through. So he could definitely do that to Sterling. Just the obvious question is, will he be able to stay on his feet long enough? Sterling was a very good amateur wrestler. He's a great MMA wrestler, and because he's a funk style wrestler, it translates seamlessly into his grappling. Like, Sterling is a special grappler. He's a lot of fun to watch grapple, and he's just nasty dangerous to his opponents there. I don't know if I've seen much from O'Malley that makes me think he's going to be able to keep this at his preferred striking range for very long. My thought is that O'Malley has probably about the first 40 seconds of each round, for however long this goes, to really line Sterling up for the shot at mid to long range that most of his kill shots have been. And I just don't think he gets it done. I'm with you in thinking the Zhang versus Lemos line was a little out of whack. Here I understand a little better why it is what it is, because I don't think Sterling's going to give O'Malley many chances to do his thing. O'Malley's best chance would be to catch Sterling with a just brutal knee like Moroz did. And I don't think he gets it done. I think Sterling gets O'Malley down. And I think O'Malley probably proves to be surprisingly survivable down there. O'Malley he's not a dummy. He knows exactly where Sterling's bread is buttered. He knows that I hope that he's been practicing his get-up game off of his back. I hope he's been practicing protecting his neck in scrambles, because most of this fight is probably going to be Sterling either setting up shop in top position, chipping away and trying to advance, or Sterling getting funk style takedowns and just keeping things rolling until he can take his back and make it a short night. I think he gets it done. Give me Sterling to get a first round submission here. Emphatic work that all but his most ardent detractors will have to shut up, at least for a few weeks. And the real suspense will be what's next for this division. But for now, for Saturday, Sterling by first round submission, and I don't think we get to see much of the Sugar Show.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about people who doesn't give Aljamain Sterling credit. It's funny, even if he wins, I still don't think he'll get credit. People say, "Oh, O'Malley was just a hype job, didn't deserve this, didn't beat anybody in the top 5, or was coming off a split decision that people thought he lost." Like they'll take that away. And then he's already he was on the MMA Hour today and told Ariel Helwani that he's 99% sure this is his last fight at bantamweight, win or lose. Then they'll start saying he ran from Marab, his teammate. There'll always be something that he doesn't get credit for. I understand the hate. Like, you win the title by disqualification, you defend it in a split decision, you have the TJ Dillashaw, whatever you want to call it, scumbag move, and then you have another split decision win. But I must be the only person who watches those, and I'm constantly impressed by him. He moves well. He's pretty elusive. He constantly fighting out of both stances, bouncing back and forth between the two, bouncing back and forth with his head off the center line. He's got high volume in his striking. He likes to work from range. He's definitely unorthodox the way he throws, lands from different angles, throws from different angles, throws to kind of get reactions, to get you moving away. He tends to not really waste energy. He kind of just touches to get you to react. And then he's not the hardest hitter. He's not going to, very, very unlikely he's going to start someone with a punch. But kicks are a big part of his game. I love his teep kicks. I mean, he was crushing Pedro Munhoz with body kicks. Though Munhoz did hurt him back with a body kick. Nice switch high kick he has. But a lot of, like I said, I kept saying that he does things to make you move and to react. He's a very opportunistic wrestler. He's going to throw something, get your hands up, shoot underneath. He isn't explosive, but he has this good ability to time his entries. Very similar to, in the past I've described, very similar to George St. Pierre, where, it's not the fastest entry, it's not the best setup. It just, he's got good timing, and he'll dive in for a takedown, use those long arms to close the distance. Very similar to Michael Chiesa. He's relentless to get the fight to the ground too. He uses his long legs so well to wrap up his opponents. Locks in, takes his back, can ride back. He backpacks everybody. I mean, he out-wrestled the Olympic champion Henry Cejudo. Now, you know how I feel about Henry Cejudo's wrestling. If you heard me say it's not Olympic level anymore, but still means a lot at any time to out wrestle a guy like that. And I know it wasn't completely out wrestle, but just getting takedowns and getting positions on a guy like that is very impressive. Good.
I was just going to say, ironically, despite Cejudo's, hanging so much of his persona on being the Olympic champ, he might be a better MMA wrestler. Like, he was the best amateur wrestler in the world for about 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, I've said that I don't want to go off a tangent, but his wrestling is so overrated. Like we do these top 10 lists for Sure Dog, and we were talking about wrestling, and people were like ranking his wrestling higher than, and I know it's not fair when you're talking about MMA wrestling versus collegiate wrestling, but like a guy like him being ranked over Kenny Monday, like that's silly. That's absolutely silly. Like that's like no comparison, Anyways, back on topic. He's a great submission threat. I mean, that's his game. He has amazing, variety of submission. I mean, he had a Sulo stretch, submission. Cardio is really good. It's got the cardio to go 25 minutes. We saw that in a lot of his fights. His Petroski fight, his recent fight against Henry Cejudo. Sean O'Malley, what I'll say about him is he's that balance. Now he's confident, but with a cockiness. But it's almost a balance between Garry and McGregor, where his unwillingness to admit defeat, to me, it's not a cockiness. He is cocky, but it's I don't know what the word is. It's almost like unwillingness to give up on himself. He seems very mentally strong, and I really think he's going to try to get into Aljamain Sterling's head this year. Try to get it personal. Try to get Aljo to stand up and strike with him and make him want to hurt him, and psych him out a little bit. He's a long and lengthy striker who's a very good athlete. He flows between his stances so well, very fast, very fluid. Quick twitch. You talk about all his striking and the things he do. His accuracy is the most impressive thing to me about his game. He lands clean, nice jab, good variety in striking. He's one of the best of distracting with the left hand to hide his right hand, which is like a kill switch. You said I'll say good at beating his foe to the punch. Also good at picking up his opponent's timing and rhythm. He likes to lay traps that his opponent falls into. Does well with feints, good at slipping shots and leave himself in position to counter. Though he does sometimes pull his head straight back, and he does drop his hands when slipping shots. And he can also coast at times. I mean, we saw that against Pedro. We saw that against Marlon Vera early on, where he's letting them get off and not come back. You look at his build, you don't think he's going to be this power puncher. But I mean, he starches dudes. Even fights that he doesn't win by knockout. Say what you want about that Petroski fight. He hurt Petroski many times. Mm-hmm. That fight was way closer than the Sean O'Malley hate group pretends it was. I could watch that fight 100 times and score 50 times for O'Malley. Jan was hurt many times in that fight. And you said that O'Malley is the guy who's most likely that could one punch knock out Sterling. And at first I was like, I know there's got to be someone in the division. Then I started scrolling through the names of the division when you said that, and I can't find anybody. I had $100 and I had to bet on someone to knock out Sterling, but with a punch or something. To me, it has to be O'Malley. Who's the hard hitter that I'm in the division? So I mean, this guy's more technical boxing, but. And not much more technical, but the pure power, I mean, it's there. He's got good power on both hands, and he also got good power in both stances. He sets up spinning attacks pretty easily. He's creative. He doesn't check leg kicks, which is, I said this last time, it's a major issue. I mean, we've seen it in a couple fights now. But in fairness, he did check leg kicks a little bit against Peñones, though it wasn't enough. He's not much of a grappler so far in the UFC. He hasn't really faced a top-notch grappler or someone whose main strategy is to wrestle him. But he was taken down 6 times by Petroski, which is not a good sign in his last fight. Now, he's pretty good at creating scrambles and getting up, which I like. And he showed that he has a good gas tank, that even like a close battle right there, he could find something, dig deep, and win a close fight. So regardless how you feel about O'Malley, regardless if you think he won or you lost, he showed that he's upper echelon talent in the division. Even if you think he lost to Young. That said, I'm with you. I think this is a poor stylistic matchup. Sterling is a better wrestler than Jan, and Jan was able to take down O'Malley. He's the better grappler than Jan. Sterling said something about the UFC delaying this fight, that he was supposed to fight O'Malley next, but they give him Henry Cejudo to give O'Malley, the golden boy of the UFC, the guy they want to win, an extra year to train jiu-jitsu and be ready. I don't know how true that is. It could be just pre-talk, but I still don't think it's going to matter. I think Sterling takes down O'Malley. I think he uses heavy grappling. I think it's really smart. O'Malley kind of like basically calling him a pussy and saying, if whoever shoots first is the pussy, and trying to make it $100 bet or something.
It's the exact thing that like Conor tried on Dustin Poirier.
Yeah, of course.
Like the first one to shoot's a dusty bitch.
Yeah. So say what you want about Sterling. Like, he even made a joke. He's like, "Oh yeah, if I first one to shoot, but is a body lock takedown considered a shot?" Like, like Sterling, pay the $100. Like, shoot. The win bonus would be more than $100. I think we see heavy grappling. I think that slows O'Malley down. I think that zaps O'Malley's power the further we go in the fight. I think Sterling wears him down, tires him out. I think Sterling eventually locks in a submission. I say Sterling wins by submission in 4th round.
All right, that's 2 picks for Aljamain Sterling to retain his title by submission. One early, one late, depending on which of us you want to go with there. But we both seem to think that the Funk Master will get one more stab at the mass acceptance that on some level he must crave. That's it. That is the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 292, Sterling versus O'Malley. I've been Ben Duffy. He's been Keith Shillan. If this is your first time checking out one of our previews, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring a mix of actual in-depth analysis and the occasional humorous or historic aside. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights, or if you think we're completely, out of our gourd on any of these. There's a good chance you're right, and if you're right, then we'll give you all the credit. Most importantly, though, join us for the recap. We're live on the Sherdog YouTube page, usually about 10 or 15 minutes after the main event, where we break down all of these fights in reverse order, from the headliner all the way down to the first prelim, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. And talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And the live chat on the Sherdog YouTube page is open that whole time. So we are going back and forth with you in real time, taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Keith, of course, will be on site in Boston, taking in these fights live. Keith, I wish you safe travels. I know it's,
Thank you, brother.
I know you can be to Boston quicker than I can be to Dallas, but I hope you have safe travels. I hope you are rewarded with a great night of fights, and I hope you're able to return and report, whatever cool behind the scenes shit you saw.
Can I say this real quick? So,
please.
To any of our listeners, I know I think he messaged me on social media. One of the listeners messaged me. If you're in Boston this weekend for the fights and you're going there and you're a listener, you're a frequent listener to the show, send me a message. I'd love to meet some people. So if you go and maybe we can make it happen, I can meet you guys. That'd be cool.
There you go. So if you're gonna be in Boston, get in touch with Keith. Either way, thank you again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.